Good day, dear friends. We are here in our daily format to analyze the situation at the front. Together, we examine maps showing advances and retreats, making forecasts and drawing conclusions about how specific events may ultimately impact the overall situation and dynamics at the front. Before we begin, I would sincerely like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription helps the channel grow. Many thanks to everyone who has subscribed. Now, this morning started off quite tense for Ukraine due to a massive shelling carried out by the Russian aerospace forces. Strikes targeted various regions and cities, focusing on energy, military, and other infrastructure. Let's open the maps and start analyzing the current events. Today, we will touch on another area of combat that we haven't discussed before, primarily because active fighting there had not been occurring. I am, of course, talking about Syria. Yesterday, militants launched large-scale counter-offensive actions not only against Syrian positions but also against Russian ones. Reports even suggest that 2 Russian Special Forces soldiers were taken prisoner. What do you think? Coincidence? Suddenly, when the Russian army is achieving evident and significant successes on the Ukrainian front, another front becomes active. And why is this connected? First, these militants received weapons from Ukraine, underwent training with Ukrainian armed forces instructors, and even received intelligence from Ukrainian sources. Naturally, this is no coincidence, but a carefully planned operation with clear objectives: to weaken both Russia's influence in this region and the Russian army on the Ukrainian front. Since the start of the operation in Ukraine, Russian command redeployed part of its air defense systems from Syria to the front and reduced personnel there. This made sense, as the main combat operations in Syria had concluded by 2020, whereas things in Ukraine did not go as planned, necessitating the use of resources from Syria. Now, however, militants have managed to consolidate forces. Yesterday, they launched an offensive mirroring tactics used by the Ukrainian armed forces during their incursion into Russia's Kursk region. The scenario and methods are practically identical. Let's get into the details. They advanced from this area toward the major city of Aleppo. Their primary objective was to cut off the M5 highway, which connects Aleppo to another major city, Hama. As of this morning, they succeeded in severing the highway. In a single day, they advanced 20 kilometers, came close to the city, and are now just 3 kilometers away. This development forces the Russian command to make a tough choice: either abandon Syria or redirect resources to this region to stabilize the situation. Now let's return to the more familiar Ukrainian front, where the Russian army has recorded successes. We'll begin with the Kursk region, where progress has been documented. Specifically, the village of Darino has come under full and uncontested Russian control. The advance now moves toward the neighboring village of Nikolaevka Darino. Russian forces have already reached the village, entered and secured positions on its outskirts, with fighting ongoing. Perhaps the most significant news is about the long-suffering village of Novaya Ivanovka, which has returned home. Russian forces have taken the village under full control. Additionally, there is another success further south. Here, Russian forces entered and secured a forested area near the village of Makhnovka. From this position, the city of Sudzha is now less than 5 kilometers away. Moving on to the situation in the Kharkiv region, Russian forces are expanding their bridgehead on the right bank of the Oskol River. This is a serious concern for the Ukrainian Armed Forces Command for obvious reasons. A few days ago, Russian forces conducted an airborne operation to deploy infantry on the right bank. At the time, they quickly captured Ukrainian defensive positions because they were completely abandoned. Initially, the control zone was very small and limited to this specific area. Now, however, you can see how much it has expanded. Reconnaissance and sabotage groups are already reported to have entered the village of Dvoreshnoye. This isn't just a small hamlet with a few houses, it's a fairly large settlement, comparable in size to the city of Sudzha in the Kursk region. They haven't established a foothold there, but that hasn't been a priority for now. However, if Russian forces manage to capture it, it will undoubtedly serve as a strong position for further offensive operations southward, toward the right bank part of Kupiansk. In addition to the success on the right bank of the Oskol River, progress was also noted on the left bank, specifically in the village of Novomlinsk. A few days ago, I mentioned that Russian forces had reached its outskirts. Now they've entered the village and established a foothold. Let's move further south. The map hasn't yet been updated, but you can see the village of Zeleny Gai here. Russian forces have entered it, as well as Kupiansk. For a while, conflicting reports were coming in about whether Ukrainian forces had been expelled from Kupiansk or not. According to the latest data, as of this morning, they have been pushed out. This success allowed Russian forces to advance to the outskirts of Zeleny Gai. Otherwise, this advance wouldn't have been possible. Let's now move to Chasiv Yar. The main fighting continues to unfold in the city center, particularly around the refractories plant. This area, as you can see, is a heavily fortified stronghold that Russian forces struggled to capture for a long time, even with the use of FAB bombs. However, as of this morning, they've managed to enter and secure a foothold, gradually pushing Ukrainian forces out of the area. Additionally, there are attempts to advance towards Stupochki, located south of Chasiv Yar. Russian forces aim to break through there to begin moving down the slope toward the city of Kostiantynivka. In Toretsk, the situation remains dynamic. Control shifts between the Ukrainian and Russian forces almost daily. The most recent recorded successes for Russia include advances on the flanks in the southern part of Nelepovka and reaching Svitla Street in Toretsk itself. In the Pokrovska direction, there haven't been significant changes. Movements continue from Lysivka toward Toshinska and along the railway line from Zhovta toward Shevchenko, which is essentially the outskirts of Pokrovsk. Further south, the village of Berestki has now been marked red on the map, indicating full and uncontested control by Russian forces, which has also been acknowledged by the opposing side. Videos from the village surfaced yesterday showing the Russian flag being raised, although I mentioned earlier that Ukrainian forces had retreated from there 3 days ago. In Kurakov, the battles are gradually shifting. They're moving from areas with multi-story residential buildings to the western industrial zone. Russian-controlled territory south of Kurakov is also expanding. Movements are now underway from Dalny toward Uspanovka, forming a new encirclement involving Ukrainian garrisons in the villages of Vesely Gai and Anovka. Finally, we come to Velika Novosilka. Russian forces have secured a firm foothold on its eastern outskirts and are now launching probing attacks toward the town center. The objective is clear: to test and disrupt Ukrainian defenses within the settlement. Velika Novosilka is a strategically significant town that protects the large city of Mariupol from the north. Capturing it would push Ukrainian forces farther from Crimea, making it harder for them to target Crimea with cruise and ATACMS missiles. Additionally, the area is highly advantageous for launching offensives westward toward the city of Dnipro, which lies roughly 150 kilometers, around 100 miles, away. Ukrainian forces are actively reinforcing this sector of the front because losing it would be a significant blow for Ukraine. Besides expanding Russia's land corridor to Crimea from mainland Russia, this area is strategically important for other reasons. From this point, there's an excellent opportunity to bypass Ukrainian defenses built along the Zaporizhzhia axis since 2022, into which a tremendous amount of resources were invested. The current advances on the front lines indicate that the Ukrainian army is seriously weakened and gradually losing confidence in its victory. While Ukraine still has considerable forces, the impact of Trump's election victory in the US and heavy losses at the front are making themselves felt, leaving a mark. Many experts note that in a war of attrition, Ukraine's chances are slim, and it would be more prudent for them to pursue a peace agreement before the front collapses at a catastrophic pace. That's all for the current situation on the front for today.